Welcome everyone. This is Christian Nix, the author of the Pivot Protocol, and I'm shooting this video to answer some of the really overwhelming amount of questions. But what I'm trying to do in these videos is not just answer specific questions, but also to cover the important ones that I get asked multiple times. It makes sense in a situation like a digestive illness that there's going to be, number one, just based on the material that I have for you, some pretty deep confusion. I understand if you're discovering what a really, really old medical system has to do and has to say about modern digestive illness and sort of the epidemic of people with chronic digestive problems like acid reflux, you're gonna find some things in there, both from a vocabulary point of view, terminology, and also from a just conceptual point of view that are probably pretty weird and even in some ways kind of freaky. And so it's valuable to take this time in these videos to break down some of that so that it's not intimidating to you, it's not overwhelming, it's not so far out that you can't even get your feet under you and get started. And so in these videos I try to give a very brief overview, quickly, of the Pivot Protocol, why it's so different. We're working with a different mechanism to heal your body. And it's so different that sometimes people miss it until they actually start seeing results, and then it kind of hits them that like, whoa, actually this mechanism does work. And it's so different than anything you've been exposed to in modern medicine as well. And so that's what we're doing here, but I also have a list of questions. Today I'm going to cover, as the title suggests, what you need to know about SIBO, small intestine bacterial overgrowth. A lot of people with reflux get a diagnosis of SIBO. Why? Why? What's the relationship? Okay. Somebody writes in, excuse me, somebody writes into me every single week, usually multiple people, saying, hey, I took your quiz and I came back with damp or liver or cold or dry reflux, whatever the case may be, but I think I probably have multiple types because I have this symptom too. I didn't know which one to select in your quiz. It's like the purpose of the quiz is to get you to realize that there are different types, right? And even the word types is it's neither accurate nor inaccurate. I'm using it as a device to try to help you understand not all reflux is the same. Obviously, right? I mean, obviously there's going to be a couple unique things about your situation. And so by building broad categories like this, we move away from the kind of Western modern medical stupidity that says, oh, well, everybody with reflux magically created too much stomach acid in the last 20 to 30 years, since this is kind of a recent phenomenon. And that just doesn't cut it. I mean, it doesn't look deep enough. There's no part of that makes sense. Now, your doctor never said that to you, but the logic of their diagnosis and specifically their solution to the problem, the logic is revealed in their solution, which is you have reflux, too much stomach acid, let's block the stomach acid. And so the logic itself is consistent, but they're starting in the wrong place. You could say, okay, well, if everyone has too much stomach acid and also we block it, that's going to fix things, but it's like, holy shit. I mean, you don't need your stomach acid? Obviously, it's there for a reason, right? So what happens when you stop, you block the production and the effectiveness of your stomach acid? Well, nothing good, right? If you need your stomach acid and you've just diluted it by taking a pill, what's going to happen to the rest of your digestive organs? Your spleen and your intestines and your liver aren't all influenced by that pill? Your kidneys aren't influenced by blocking stomach acid? So that you produce all these other symptoms, right? And that even just starting out, even a lack of say side effects or harmful sort of downside from taking modern medicines, acid blockers, H2 blockers, etc. Even in the absence of that, people who generate a condition of acid reflux are going to have slightly different, the word is pathophysiology, right, where you have a different mechanism that's imbalancing your specific body, causing your specific reflux. And we can tell that by looking at the constellation of various symptoms. It's a pattern. It's not too much stomach acid. It's a pattern of other things that have gone out of balance, resulting in acid and bile flowing back upward. Okay? So that's the basis of, that's like a philosophical difference in the medical systems. And it's not a small difference. It's a gigantic difference. It's all the difference that you need to get from, okay, well, I'm going to keep going to the doctor and getting more pills, and then when that doesn't work, I'll get surgery on my lower esophageal lower esophageal sphincter muscle, and then I'll get my stomach stapled after that, and then I'll get put on dialysis after my kidneys fail, because modern medicine knows how to treat me for acid reflux. It's like, I've never met a person, and don't expect to, who thinks that that's a good path to go down, and yet a lot of them are going down that path, versus, oh, all of these things are imbalanced in my specific organs, and we know that because of the symptoms that I'm presenting. We know what dryness means. We know what, right, fatigue and getting dizzy when you stand up means. We know what that indicates about my organs and X, Y, and Z, like down the line. And also, if we deal with those individual organ imbalances, my reflux goes away on its own because my organs now work together the way they were supposed to. That's a philosophical difference evinced by a completely different mechanism of healing. And I mean, are acid blockers healing, really? I mean, that's not actually a mechanism of healing. You're not healing anything. You're putting a stop to a very important bodily function, which causes problems. So you're making yourself sicker. Versus, we can balance out our organs so that they start pulling together, right? They work together instead of attacking one another. It's an apt metaphor because in some ways, right, the end stage of digestive illness, the worst stage that you can get to, the worst blow-up, the equivalent of a nuclear holocaust meltdown, right, in your body, nuclear meltdown in your body's reactor core, right, to use a nuclear metaphor here, is autoimmune disease. And autoimmune disease is when your body is attacking itself. And it's like, when you get to that stage, it's really bloody obvious that you're in trouble. But that was going on a long time before all those symptoms got so bad that now you are in an emergency situation, and good luck to you, right? So that's what we want to avoid. We at least want to avoid driving off the road in that direction. So everyone has multiple types. I'm already dealing with the questions here. Colonoscopy, should you get one? Should you not get one? What are my thoughts on it? Weight loss. A lot of people write in like, oh, I'm scared to lose more weight. I know you're saying we should, do X, Y, and Z, but I'm scared that I'm going to lose more weight. It's like, okay, well, what's causing that? What do we know has to be going on, right? And what do you need to know, obviously, to be sure that you're playing it safe and get to your doctor. Like I say to everybody, if you need to get to a doctor, get to a doctor. Like, we're not here to beat up on modern medicine, except to point out the specific bad thinking that applies to their approach to reflux disease. I'm not here to say I worked with modern medical people for a number of years, and I actually had a lot of really good relationships. Some of them seem very bitter to me, not surprisingly, and the drinking and whatnot. And so, and a lot of doctors, I mean, look at the statistics on how many doctors quit. And so it's not easy to be a doctor. It's actually a really shitty profession in a lot of ways. I'm not saying anything bad about doctors so much as they're trapped in a kind of matrix that they can't get out of. And by the time they realize that they're in it, there ain't no getting out, right? And so a lot of them take a big hit by bailing on medicine. But the medical system's a train wreck, in case you can't tell. Certainly in the U.S. where I live now, there's a big problem, but that's beyond the scope of this video. So, weight loss, get to a doctor. If you think you're in trouble, get to a doctor. Losing weight could mean you have malignancy. Okay, but I'll come back to that. And blood tests. I had a student write in asking about, hey, I have X, Y, and Z, my ferritin levels. She asked about a couple things that I look at and I was like, first of all, I'm not a doctor. I don't know what those necessarily would specifically say, but can you rely on blood tests to tell you anything about your condition at all? Like, really? And how much, right? Because we know some things, if they show up on your blood test, it's like, whoa, man, you got a raging infection inside your body, or you have signs of this, right? But when you get to nitpick down to individual things that are on your blood panel exam that come back, how do you know what relates to your symptomology? Is that a reliable cause and effect kind of relationship? How valuable is it to be paying attention to your blood test? Okay? And then the last one, and this is sort of like I'll try to be brief, but I'll have to be brutal. Applied kinesiology. I got a question about it. I don't know that they were asking about applied kinesiology or if there's some other kind of kinesiology. But a lot of you will come across people who claim to do kinesiology, and what that is in the way that they mean it in the common sort of vernacular of alternative medicine, is people doing muscle testing to diagnose you. And so I'll come back to it and I'll explain what that is and why it's, of course, kind of dangerous bullshit. Obviously dangerous bullshit, right? So why do people get SIBO? Look, one of the things we know, guaranteed, is going on if you have acid reflux is that you have food stagnation. Now that's a technical term, but it's exactly what it sounds like. Food is stuck, you eat food, and it gets stuck inside your small and large intestines. Well, what happens if like if the power goes out and all the food in the refrigerator is not cold, right? Or what happens if you just leave something out, right, on the countertop? Well, it rots. That's what happens. And so food does not stay food if it's inside you in your 100-degree body and with all the various chemicals that your body is producing to try to extract nutrients from it. If it is stagnating, you have a problem, obviously, okay? And one of the problems specifically that comes out of that is when you have food stagnating in your intestines, bacteria gets to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. It multiplies exponentially. When you take a crap, most of that is bacteria. It's bulk fiber that you're seeing, but mostly you're expelling bacteria from your intestine. Like your stool is like 90% bacteria. Okay? So it's a ridiculous difference when you do take a crap every day versus when you don't. And then there's all kinds of specifics about, well, are you getting good elimination? Even though you move your bowels, like, are your intestines really emptying? And there's all kinds of reasons why you can get irritation on the lining of the intestine, and then things stick to it, and then what happens, right? These kind of mucousy stools, that's very common, right? Once you get to a certain stage, that's exactly what's going to happen to you. So you have small intestine bacterial overgrowth. Why? Why is that happening? Because food is stagnating in your small intestine. Okay? So what should you do? Should you take an antibiotic? Well, part of the reason people get reflux and food stagnation is because the fad word today, obviously, is microbiome. If you haven't seen this, you can read a lot about it. Ancient medical systems even had an understanding of the microbiome way before we had any notion about germ theory, which by itself is pretty interesting. But they didn't understand in terms of tiny bacteria and things like this, so it's not that the medical system that I'm bringing you has a specific thing to say about that, but we do know how to get rid of bloating and gas and all the things that result from bacterial overgrowth and how to rebalance that, and also, of course, to stimulate gently the movement of food and waste through your intestines, okay? Because that's how you fix it. So it's, I make this joke and this metaphor. It's like a lot of people do want to know the color of the truck that ran them over. And it's like, I'm not in that business. And hopefully you're not looking for that kind of information. You don't need to know everything there is to know about SIBO so much as you need to understand why it's happening and what you can do about it. And that's what we cover in the Pivot Protocol. We know what's causing your bloating and gas. We know what the result of bacterial overgrowth in your small intestine will be. And also we know how to correct for the underlying cause of that specific symptom. Right? If you have bloating and gas, you have food stagnation. And you almost certainly, how could you have bloating and gas, which is the product of bacterial reproduction, if you didn't have bacterial reproduction? So we know the root cause is that bacteria is multiplying because you get bloating and gas. Okay, and it doesn't matter if it's in your small intestine, large intestine. This is another case of Western medicine, modern medicine being too specific. What does it matter if it's SIBO or whatever that would be, large intestine, LIBO, right? What does it matter? It doesn't matter at all. Okay, you have bacterial overgrowth, you have bacterial overgrowth. The specificity of the diagnosis is kind of useless. The main thing is food and waste are not moving, bacteria is multiplying, and you're getting bloating and gas. And guess what comes next, right? You're on your way to autoimmune disease. So it's a really simple solution to deal with that. It's really simple, but you also need to understand the mechanism that your body is producing. Why is your body allowing that to happen, right? Should you just take laxatives and get it out of there? Like, yeah, good luck with that, right? You need to know why your body's doing it, and that's what I go into in the protocol. I said everybody has multiple types. Okay, everybody has multiple types of reflux. Even if you're not aware of it, you do. You just haven't looked deeply enough at what your body's saying to you. Okay, so if you have dryness, you have symptoms of dryness. If you have, cold reflux, you have these symptoms. If you have liver reflux, you definitely have these symptoms. Okay, and most people have multiple the symptoms of liver reflux: difficulty swallowing, getting agitated easily. Dryness, right? Especially having to do with dry intestines. That's kind of an obvious one, but also evidence that blood is not circulating and nourishing your organs correctly. Okay, that usually shows up first in your eyes, in your vision, and on down the line, right? What are the symptoms of dampness, phlegm, right? Mucus and phlegm in the back of the throat, possible productive cough, right? Difficulty breathing deeply, etc., etc. So everybody has a constellation of these things because the organs, back to my original rant, right? The organs are connected. Your symptoms do influence one another. If your spleen breaks down, what's going to happen to your liver and stomach? Well, nothing good. Well, what's happening to your intestines? Well, you have to produce more dampness. You have to. Your spleen is responsible for keeping dampness out. So now you have more symptoms showing that your intestines have been affected. And then here's how the weak spleen affects the liver. I mean, all of these things are connected. We're talking about a medical system here that is explicit in the way it breaks down and makes obvious to the patient how your organs are connected, how your symptoms are connected, how you're different. This thing happening over here is also related to this thing happening. Can't see myself on the camera. This thing happening over here is related to this thing happening over here. They're not two separate things. They're tied together. Okay? We can treat them individually in a sense, right? We want to target a symptom and try to get rid of it, but fixing one helps to fix the other. Okay? So they're related, and we need to know how they're related and how these organs influence one another. I spent a lot of time explaining that in the master class. Should you get a colonoscopy? Look, my feeling is they're very dangerous. You can get stool tests now, like from your home. You don't even need to go to the doctor. I forget what it's called. It's like Cologuard or something like this. And you mail off a stool sample, and the lab takes care of it, and they tell you what's going on. It's not that they can find everything in that. I don't know how else you detect polyps, but certainly, evidence of cancer, bleeding in your stool, anything that might indicate that there's something radically wrong inside your intestines, a lot of that can be done pretty safely and pretty conveniently now. Colonoscopy is dangerous. I knew a guy who had his colon perforated. They shove a tube up your butt and with a camera on it, and then they look around, and if they have to biopsy something, they'll take a sample of maybe a polyp or some kind of suspicious looking tissue. And I mean, it's dangerous, it's dangerous. It's very uncomfortable. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. Don't do it if you don't have to do it. If you think you need one at age 50, get it, but understand it. It's not safe to be doing that, and it's also obviously for a lot of reasons, right? It's fairly unpleasant. And there's other ways to test for it. Okay, maybe you don't need one, but you decide. Right? And don't ask your doctor only to decide. Like, read up a little bit on it. And don't just listen to me to decide either. Right? I'm telling you that they're not as necessary as people think. Right? Medicine's a little outdated with this, and maybe your doctor's hip to, okay, well, let's do this kind of test first. And if we have to look in there, we will, but hopefully not. Right? But should you just get one because you turned 50? I don't know. I disagree. Right? I don't think that's necessary. So And I don't think the cost outweighs the risk, too. When you are losing weight, we know this for a fact. Okay? Your liver is hot, your spleen is weak, and in general, you've run a deficit for too long, right? If you just use a financial metaphor here, you borrowed money that you couldn't pay back, and that money made you even more in debt, and you couldn't pay that back, and your body is out of cash. Okay? If you've run out of fat to burn and you've lost weight and I'm like that, right? I never had any spare flesh, and I definitely don't have any now that I'm almost 50. My body burned it up, and I never had a lot to burn in the beginning. And so heat from your liver is definitely part of that scenario. Now, the heat in your liver gets worse with age. There's not much you can do about it except to just keep it under control, but it's on a one-way journey, right? Your liver is on a one-way journey always to overheating until, and God bless them, I went dancing last week, and there was a 94-year-old couple on the floor, and we're in Florida, and he's wearing like a lightweight parka, as if he was in New York City in October, So God bless him. I mean, eventually you get cold, but that happens right at the end, right? That happens way, way, way down the slope. Most people in their adult years are going to be too hot. Almost everybody has some quote-unquote evil heat as part of their problem. But your spleen is also responsible for making your body full and round and filled out with lots of flesh and muscle, big, round, healthy muscles. That's a healthy spleen. That's why you look the way you look when you're 19, right? And you have that flush and bloom of youth because all the blood is filling out everything. That's your spleen's job to make that happen. Okay? Well, your spleen is shot by about age 35. It's already hit the top of the arc, and now it's slowly headed down the other side. It's your spleen that declines first. It's your digestive system that changes when you're 35 to 40 years of age because of this shift and this change in your spleen. You understand? So liver and spleen, for sure, but then also it's an aspect that I haven't dealt with or that I don't deal with because it's not really tied to something like acid reflux. It's subsumed under the category of dryness in a sense, but this is not dryness like, oh, my throat is dry, I feel thirsty, although you would have a dry throat, right, if you have the kind of dryness that I'm about to tell you about. But also, oh, I have dry intestines because my stool comes out in little balls, right? Yes, you might have all those, but you also have a deep systemic dryness. It's kind of like a wasting condition. Okay, it's a wasting condition because as you age, as you get older, right, your body shrinks. You don't produce as much healthy blood and flesh, and your body wastes away. Now, you might get fatter as you get old, but you're shrinking underneath. The fat isn't like an extra layer. That's all dampness on the outside. You understand? Fat is damp. So some people get fatter as they get older. Some people get thinner as they get older, and they don't build up an extra layer of fat. That's not a healthy layer of fat. That's like lazy fat, right? That's like the fat you get from being basically not too sedentary, being a slob kind of thing, and eating and never burning it off. Okay, when you're young and healthy, the fat is mixed in between your organs. It's in the tissue, and it gets used up as fuel. So you have this deep layer of fuel that burns up. And then some people put fat on the outside of that and get obese, a lot of people obviously. And then the minority, the 80-20 rule is obesity is 80%, and then the 20% are like me, right, you get thin, right? Can you afford to be fasting and all the rest if that's your case? And you've lost weight and you're worried about losing more. Here's the dilemma. Obviously, you got to eat if you're going to keep your figure, right, in a good sense, like a healthy, good, robust, round, kind of, athletic, to whatever degree, healthy presentation. They call mesomorphic, right? You want to stay as mesomorphic as you can for as long as you can, although we are headed in some direction other than that by the aging process. Can you do the pivot protocol and also avoid losing more weight? Well, here's the situation. When you get that hot that you're wasting away and your body's burning itself up, what you have to actually figure out how to do is to get rid of the heat when your body's resting so that you sleep through the night, because the sleep by itself will help you put on weight, and the rest, the deep rest by itself, will help you keep your body weight on more than whatever you eat. Because typically what happens is people who are thin, say ectomorphic, people who are thin pathologically and can't afford to lose more weight, you can't eat more food to put on more bulk. Your mechanism has gone to it's not that it works the opposite way. It still works like anyone else's, but it's gone to this extreme position where the more food you eat, the more heat you create. The more food you put in, the hotter your liver gets, the more it burns up your deep cache reserves of substance. It's a terrible cycle to be in. It's terrible. But mostly what you have to do is fast long enough to turn the heat off. Your liver's like a furnace, right? And it's hot, 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 and you're burning up fuel. And you shut it off for the nighttime, and you get a ton of rest, and you wake up and you eat. And maybe you eat one big meal in the morning and another, reasonably good-sized meal in the afternoon, and then you shut it off so that it turns off at night. Okay? Does that make sense? Because it's not easy to do. It's a timing thing partly, but it's based on your awareness. You have to get the heat turned off, and it's not easy to do. And you can't take a lot of herbs and medicinals that get rid of heat in your liver, because you just destroy your spleen. And it's your spleen that we're trying to rebuild so that you can put on some bulk. So it's not easy to do, but you can figure it out from the Pivot Protocol. I share with you exactly how to do all of that. Those basic, you want to get heat out of the liver and you want to boost the spleen, that's what I'm teaching you inside there. Okay? Should you trust blood tests? Well, I've already given you my piece about it. The way the question was, I don't have the email open in front of me. I'm trying to do this quickly because I got to get out of here. But, the problem with blood tests is there's a presupposition in the blood test that all of the markers are a priori cause and effect. What does that mean? That before we even question it, that somehow ferritin has to do, right? You have a low ferritin level according to your blood test, and that automatically equates to some kind of organic symptom and evidence of disease in your body. And that's not true. Because what do you do with the fact that there are certain people who have low ferritin who don't have your symptoms? Right? I mean, the whole thing is shot right there. It's like, does ferritin equate to some symptom that you're experiencing that means that you're sick? And the answer is no, it doesn't. I mean, not that I'm aware of. I mean, maybe somebody can call me to book on this, but and her answer was, the rest of the email said, so they have me on iron supplements and all the rest. It's like, well, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Again, I'm not a medical doctor, but I know people, you put them on iron supplements and they get very sick. And so is there a better way, right? Is there a better way to, in this case, think about your diagnostic evidence? It might not be that smart. I'm not saying don't get blood tests. I'm not saying don't go to your doctor. But it might not be that smart to put a ton of credence on a criteria as specific as your blood ferritin levels. It's just not conclusive. There's too many other things that focusing on ferritin doesn't take into account. And if ferritin was like the one nutrient that would get rid of your disease or some big block of your symptoms, well, we would know that, right? We would have figured that out. But there's no such thing like that. There's no place in the body where you could say, oh, it's the ferritin, of course. Wow, why didn't we know that? Here's your iron pills, and boom, all of a sudden you're 18 again. That's not how it works. The body is so complex. If anything, you have to be careful, like, okay, well, apparently your ferritin levels are low. Now, we don't know if that's a huge problem or not, but here's what our normative ranges are. If we do something about this, we need to be very careful not to mess you up somewhere else, because this may be related to, 9 other things we're not even aware of. And 9 is nothing. The body is so complex. It's so complicated when you start messing around with something like blood chemistry. A lot of people running around taking iron supplements, especially women, right, who end up sick from them. They cause all kinds of problems, right? So be careful. The cure could the treatment could kill you on that. I'm not saying it will kill you. I'm saying that the focus on a specific part of your blood panel is almost always a mistake. If you have radical high, white blood cell count, well, probably there's an infection inside you, and that's what Western medicine's pretty good at detecting and dealing with. But be careful. Be careful. Ferritin is a little too obscure to me. Applied kinesiology. Well, this is a bad one to end on, so I'll try to make it hilarious. I actually was in a room with a doctor, right, in Boulder, a really kind of belligerent feminist type, who was actually doing a diagnosis of cervical cancer. Actually, the patient had a diagnosis of cervical cancer, but of course they're rabidly anti-science, as every New Age person I ever met is. And so, right, science is kind of like the evil white male patriarchy kind of attitude, and I'm not making this up. And so she tested her patient for cervical cancer to make sure the diagnosis was correct, and then to determine the cause of the cervical cancer. Now, I don't need to say that this is irresponsible as can be, okay? But my point about it is not just that it's being done by idiots, because it is, right? But that if you think for 2 seconds, you can figure out why this is total BS. And I mean, if nobody has explained this to you, like the entire scientific tradition, what we have today as modern medical science, and we can goof on it and be critical of it all we want, everybody knows that it's great. And that really what people are critical about are like the things that it still hasn't figured out. But I was like, compared to 100 years ago, would you rather live now or 100 years ago if you were sick, if you were really sick? Obviously, right, we've come a long way. So how did that happen? Well, it happened largely by taking the subjectivity of the individual practitioner out of the equation. Now, you can't do it 100%, maybe, but you can get pretty damn close in the double blinding of clinical trials and the way in which science has removed the observer's particular. It's like you're blind along these alleyways, and then you go, well, let's take those off by creating a system that at least comes much closer to scientific objectivity. Now, there's problems because what we think is objective may still not be objective. So we get that. I'm giving the devil his due, but the idea that you're going to muscle test your patient to find out why she has cervical cancer is such a dereliction of anything like proper logical methodology that you can't take these people seriously. So what am I talking about? So back up here. So I go to a doctor in Boulder, right? And she wants to test why my cervix has cancer. Haha. Whatever, right? So I hold my arm out and she goes, your cervical cancer was caused by your father, right? And then she presses down on your arm. Now, if that statement is true when you hear it, then your arm is weak. And the practitioner goes, oh, your father's to blame. And you go, oh, right? Because you're supposed to resist the practitioner's pressure. And if the statement is false, it's not your father's fault, right? Your father wasn't to blame, then you're strong because your body knows, right, the truth of the statement, right? So it's like the theory is that you can bypass sort of, and that the subconscious knows because you can bypass the conscious response that somebody might have. It's like, no, my father wasn't to blame. And then boom, your arm is weak and oh, wow, actually it turns out it was your father, right? We have proof, right? That's considered to be some kind of scientific evidence, right? And that's how it's treated because, modern science is a bunch of idiots. And I mean, I goof on them too because of the sort of stupidity of the approach for acid reflux. But this is very different. I'm saying that they've come to the wrong conclusion using their logic versus people who are doing muscle testing and applied kinesiology pretending that they have no bias. Pretending that the practitioner has no skin in the game of saying whether or not her diagnosis was correct. Like she's not coming to the clinical room with a predisposition to believe what she wants to believe and that she's right. That's If you don't see the silliness in all of that, I can't explain it better. Okay? And if muscle testing were real, and I'm not even saying muscle testing isn't real, if it is real, and that whole thing is a legitimate phenomenon where you could get the patient to focus on a statement, decide whether it's true or false, then you could use a machine to test them. Because machines don't really, right? The machine doesn't care if it's true or false. But the practitioner asking the question sure as hell cares whether it's true or false. Now, you're not going to remove that bias. I mean, she's got a whole practice. Her entire medical livelihood is tied up in hoping that she's correct with that kind of statement, right? And quite apart from any sort of cultural war issues about, because it is people in the new age doing this, and there are a ton of women running around doing kind of new age medicine. I'm not saying there's no men. I'm saying women actually believe that they're better at it and then never examine whether or not that's a good idea. By the way, there's more women than men in high-tech medicine too, right? So the phenomenon of women in medicine is neither good nor bad, right? But you don't want to be running around doing new age kind of medical practice, right? Believing that somehow you don't have a bias. That's preposterous. Obviously you have a bias. It's called making money, right? So quite apart from any other, right? I mean, this was a really angry feminist, and so what are you going to do, right? That's a well-documented phenomenon. But in any case, that's what I have to say. Applied kinesiology is I mean, it's dangerous, right? If you fall for it, right, it means, number one, you're not that smart, because you should be able to figure out for yourself why that person might have some kind of bias. Now, if you didn't think of that and it's genuine ignorance, that's why applied kinesiology is nonsense, obviously. If muscle testing's legit, find a machine and test your muscles against a machine, right, that has no bias, obviously, right? But SIBO, having multiple types, right, colonoscopy, weight loss, all of these things are covered. Okay, every bit of this is made clear. All of the important things that you need to know about the Pivot Protocol are made clear inside the material. Phase 1 is really about you figuring out if you're causing any part of your illness. Everybody I ever met with digestive illness is doing multiple things that they could stop doing and their body would recover better. So sometimes people get Phase 1, they're like, oh, I already knew all this. It's like, no, you didn't, because if you did, you wouldn't have acid reflux. Okay? I guarantee, when I never saw a patient in clinic across all the years that I practice, 2 different hospitals, right? I practice on cruise ships. All the patients I've seen who came to me with digestive disorders, it's like, well, wait a second, like, you have to understand, these symptoms are caused by what you just did at dinner. Like, I know, but I've been doing that for 20 years. That's why you got chronic digestive illness, because you keep doing this over and over. So I laid out Phase 1 to be a quick checklist with lectures, right, and some print material, and a couple solutions in a special report if you haven't seen the material yet, and you're coming to the Pivot Protocol and hearing me for the first time. And you get some solutions in there, and it's designed to get your body ready for the next step. And the next step is self-healing. And so the master class is a master class in understanding the different specific symptoms that apply to your specific organs. What if your liver's too hot, what does that look like? Like, really, like, what's the 9 or 10 things that you should be looking for? Well, if you have dryness, what else do you have besides just dry intestines with stools coming out in little balls? If your spleen's weak, what are all the symptoms you should be looking for? Because inevitably some light bulbs go on. Okay, and if you have dampness, how does that affect you? And that's what the masterclass really takes you through. It's a whole big, I have multiple videos showing you, hey, here's some foods you might cook. Here's how you do this. Here's how you take care of that set of patterns and symptoms. So there's a lot in there for you. I'm just delighted. I get more and more emails every single week. I just launched this year, 2019, so that I get to share it with so many people in a single year. It's been wildly successful. I'm generally shy about putting too many testimonials out, but you can see them at pivotprotocol.com. And we get more every week. And sometimes I have nothing else to write to you about, so I just go, I'll just tell you about all the people who wrote me this week to say thanks for how much better they feel. Okay? It's the best proof there is that this thing really works. It worked for them, it will work for you. So I hope you try it, go for it, send me your questions if you get stuck, but really apply yourself, because this is a completely different way of dealing with digestive illness, And you really owe it to yourself to find out about this. Don't be stuck and trapped in the modern medical sort of merry-go-round. Okay, there's no reason for that. If you're watching this video and you've come across the pivot protocol, don't do it. Right? Get yourself together. Go for it. And go for it and send me questions. And you have nothing to risk. You have nothing to risk. Even if you're just lazy and don't even open it and don't want to do anything, I'll still give you your money back. But what if you open it and actually learn something and you're not sick anymore? I mean, that's what's at stake here. You could not be sick ever again with digestive illness. And what does that do to your life? And how do you feel when, like, wow, like all my symptoms are gone, I'm strong again, I'm sleeping well, everything works better, my pain is gone, right? That's the goal here. That's the prize that's out there for you. I've made it so simple for you. I've made it really, really simple for you to achieve that outcome. And hundreds of other people already have. And you can too. Okay? Thanks very much. Send me your questions.